question. And of course, it's a very complicated question. And I don't know whether I can provide answers, particularly within the framework of a very short response. I think that I would say that it is important to recognize, again, the interconnections of those movements. And that while we might not be able at the moment to envision the kind of democracy which will involve not only political democracy, but economic democracy and social democracy, that notion is, it seems to me, very much a part of the struggles that are unfolding today in Brazil and in the US. I had the opportunity yesterday, I was very humbled by the opportunity to meet Preta and learn about the housing activists and the important work they're doing, challenging Brazil to think deeply about the fact that every human being deserves the right to decent housing, and that the attempt to criminalize movements, such as the housing movement, to represent them as criminal organizations and to imprison, incarcerate the activists is an indication of the real work that we have to do. And so I was very much moved listening to the stories of the activists and the work that they're doing. And that, to me, contributes to a very different notion of what counts as democracy. When I spoke day before yesterday, I was referring to the fact that we tend to think only about what I would call bourgeois democracy as the standard of democracy. And this is, of course, how democracy per se evolved. It evolved as a democracy of the minority, of a democracy that incorporated white supremacy at its very heart. And I see that the hope for democracy resides precisely in grassroots struggles, Black feminist struggles, a struggle for housing. I had the opportunity to visit the movement of the the movement of those without land, the landless movement, and I've met over the years with activists here in Brazil who were challenging police violence, and we're challenging the fact that Brazil incarcerates people at a level that begins to approach that of the United States. And I think that, all of these movements, a movement against gender violence, whether it occurs in institutionalized and public spaces or whether it occurs in more what we call private or privatized spaces or between individuals, these are the struggles that are pushing us in the direction of a democracy that we can claim promises real justice and equality. Well, first of all, this is I think my 8th visit to Brazil. I first visited Brazil in the 1990s to attend a conference of Afro-Brazilian women, where I had the opportunity of meeting women like Lisa Byros, and Hayes. So I have, I've been extremely impressed by the profound work that has happened here. As I said in my presentation, at CESC, Brazil, for many of us, was our beacon of hope, our beacon of light. And of course, when the elections happened, we promised not to pronounce the name of the person who was elected, because in the African tradition, naming is a process of according power to someone. So we restrain from participating in that process. But I am still extremely impressed by Brazil. I feel hope when I come to this country. And I sense this collective impulse, especially among young people, especially among young women and young Black women. I had the opportunity to speak in Salvador. What year was that? In 2017. And it was in connection with the celebration of the Day of Women of African Descent in Latin America. And I will never forget that gathering. It was so vibrant, and I could, the sense of hope was palpable. And my expectations for this evening, that's a pretty large audience. As I've been told that up to 15,000 people will be there. And so that in itself is impressive. But I should point out that I don't see myself as an individual as deserving that kind of attention. And I try always to demystify the representation of icons, and particularly in my case, of course, I'm really happy that people are thinking about these issues. I'm not that happy that people are thinking about me, because I've always said I tend to be someone who's rather shy. I would rather do the work behind the scenes. And it was a historical accident that I was pushed to the fore. It was a consequence of my being targeted by the racist political repression of the United States. And people came to know my name, not so much because of what I did as an individual, but because there were people literally all over the world standing with me. And I don't forget that. So I don't see, all these people as coming to see me, the individual, but recognizing the power of collective movements. I see myself as standing in for those movements, and my responsibility is to continue to encourage people to come together and to stand up and to move confidently toward the future. Well, that's a difficult question to answer because, as I said before, I don't think that I should be the main reference. And I also think that those who are struggling for justice in the US, that they should know the names of and the work of Black feminists in Brazil. I mention all the time Lydia Gonzalez because I think that her work not only foreshadows the kinds of connections that characterize, current anti-capitalist, anti-racist feminism, but because she also emphasized connections with indigenous people. And I think that is an issue that especially confronts us in the United States. That is an issue about which we can learn a great deal looking at the development of Black feminism in Brazil. There continues to be this silence, this discursive silence, this movement silence regarding indigenous people. And particularly given the emergence of an environmental justice movement, I think it is important to point out that our first references are indigenous people and their struggle to protect the land and the water and the air. So I'm somewhat ambivalent about being the reference here in Brazil, but at the same time, I think that what I can attempt to do is to create connections between the struggles in Brazil and the struggles in the US. And that is why I continue to do this work.